Remember that scene from Season 1 of Money Heist where they held the Royal Mint of Spain hostage and printed real money in a real-life plot? What if we tell you that there is a pretty much real-life story like that exists? Instead of the Royal Mint of Spain, it was the Bank of Portugal. And this wasn't a heist, it was a one-man con. Not a crew of masked robbers with a plan, but a single man. No weapons, no violence, just a cunning mind and an audacious con that fooled the entire system, and consequently caused an economic crisis that led to a nationalist military coup d'etat. One man pulled off a mind-blowing scheme that made the professor's plan look like child's play. The man in question is Artur Alves dos Reis, an engineering dropout who faked an Oxford degree and landed himself a job in Portugal. After a quick stint in jail for check fraud, he hatched a scheme so crazy it might just work. At only 20 years old, Artur faked a diploma from Oxford and claimed that he had degrees in engineering sciences, geology, geometry, physics, paleography, metallurgy, pure mathematics, electric and mechanical engineering, and applied mechanics. And he hadn't even studied any of it. No surprises there. But somehow he was made chief engineer for the Angolan railways in Portugal's colony. 2 years later, he was made director of another railway company. Even at a young age, Arturo was already showing a penchant for crime. His engineering studies were cut short when he got caught forging checks. While in custody, Artur had plenty of time to reflect on his cons, but unlike others, he reflected more on how to be better at crime. Upon release, he figured, why waste time with petty things like forged checks? He was on to a bigger scheme, printing his own money. However, there were three main hurdles he faced: making the money look real, getting it into circulation, and avoiding punishment again. Artur cooked up a plan with three main steps that would go down in history as one of the craziest counterfeiting schemes ever. Step 1. Make the bills. Faking money isn't an easy ordeal. Even if you get the paper, ink, and colors right, creating the super detailed printing plates is next to impossible. So Artur decided to work smarter, not harder. Since banks were already printing the money, he could just convince them to do the work for him. But how? By entering the Bank of Portugal, the country's central bank in charge of authorizing all the cash. The interesting thing, however, was that the Bank of Portugal didn't actually print the money themselves. They used to outsource that job to printing houses. That's where Artur's genius kicks in. He planned to approach the printing house directly and pose as a representative of wealthy businessmen wanting to invest a ton of cash in Angola, a Portuguese colony. To make it extra believable, Artur even forged a contract authorizing him to order the bills. With a fake contract and some forged signatures, the printing house wouldn't be any the wiser. But he couldn't pull off the scheme alone. Just like the professor, Artur assembled his crew, and now it was time to pick a target since the Bank of Portugal used several different printing houses. But Artur needed one that was actively printing out cash and wouldn't need to order new printing plates from the bank. Luckily for them, Artur's right-hand man, Karel Marang van Istelvier, had some connections at a Dutch printing house called Johan and Shedje. They were still busy printing money for the Portuguese. Everything was working out for them. But the printing house didn't have the right plates for this specific money. And Shedje suggested another printing house in London called Waterlow & Sons. Karel headed to London and showed William Waterlow the contract about the rich businessmen investing in Angola, and how the central bank approved printing a whopping 200 million escudos. To top it off, Karel threw in a little lie about why Waterlow should get the job over their competitor. William signed the deal on the spot. Just when Karel was about to leave, William mentioned needing to order the printing plates from the central bank and handed Karel a letter to deliver. Back in Portugal, Karel gave the letter to Artur, who promptly forged a reply of approval from the central bank. And just like that, in January of 1925, Waterlow & Sons started printing out millions of escudos. Step 1 complete. Step 2, getting rid of the fake money. Artur figured his friend Jose Bandiera could exploit his brother Antonio Bandiera's, an actual ambassador's, diplomatic immunity, which meant his luggage wouldn't get searched at customs. By March 1925, they had about 100 million escudos to launder. Artur started small, slowly drip-feeding the fake money into the system. It was slow, but it gave him some seed money for bigger plans. In April, he bought a couple of farms and acquired a taxi company. But things weren't moving fast enough for Artur, so in June he took a bold step and bribed some officials and politicians and opened his own bank, Banco de Angola y Metropole. His bank threw money at everything: businesses, infrastructure, and even regular people. The Portuguese economy boomed. Feeling confident, they ordered even more fake money from Waterloo & Sons. Artur became Portugal's richest man, and he and his crew went on a major shopping spree. Cars, jewels, designer clothes, and real estate, basically anything money could buy. Bandeiras even became a fashion icon after buying up several high-end stores. In September 1925, Artur and his German partner Adolf Hennies bought properties in Angola, invested in companies, and single-handedly created a thriving golden age of the Portuguese economy. Step 2 complete. Step 3. Become untouchable. The crew met up again in September, this time in Paris. Now came Artur's idea for the final step. At this point, they were only counterfeiting Portuguese escudos, not international currencies. That meant only the Bank of Portugal could really come after them. So, what's the plan? They decided to buy the bank. Now that's a real shocker. Over the next few months, they secretly bought as many shares in the Bank of Portugal as possible. Once they owned most of the bank, they could shut down any investigation they wanted. Back in Portugal, when banks were collapsing left and right, Artur's bank was throwing money around, so people started getting suspicious. By the end of November, Artur controlled over 43% of the Bank of Portugal's shares, but that's where the crew accidentally made a mistake. While Arturo was busy buying up land and throwing money around, Alfredo da Silva, who controlled Portugal's cooking oil market, and Pereira de Rosa, who owned a big newspaper called O Século, decided to dig up some dirt on Arturo and his bank. The reporters started asking some tough questions, and it turned out the Portuguese government was already suspicious of Banco de Angola y Metropole and had started their investigation. On December 2, 1925, a teller at a currency exchange in Porto noticed something odd. Artur's bank only gave them 501,000 escudo notes. So he took some bills to the real central bank, and it turns out the serial numbers on some of the 500 escudo notes were all the same. O Século publicly revealed the fraud on the 5th of December 1925, and people only had a few weeks to swap their fake bills for real ones. Panic erupted and Banco de Angola y Metropole was shut down. William Waterloo even had to flee the country under a fake name because people were so mad. In the end, Waterloo & Sons printed a whopping 290 million escudos. Arturo had snuck a ton of fake money into the Portuguese economy and caused the value of real escudos to plummet. With all this fake money floating around, people lost faith in the entire Portuguese government, and in 1926 a military group took advantage of the crisis and staged a coup. This eventually led to a dictatorship that lasted almost 50 years, all because a guy named Artur Alves dos Reis decided to play pretend banker. Adolf Hennies, the German accomplice, fled back to Germany before they could grab him. Unfortunately, he made some terrible investments and died a poor man in 1939. Jose Bandiera did 15 years in jail but went on to run nightclubs. He died a popular guy in the 60s. Karel Meringue, the right-hand man, got an 11-month sentence but skipped out on jail time altogether. He started a successful appliance company in France and died in his Cannes vacation home in the 60s. Waterloo & Sons only had to pay Portugal back for the dodgy notes people cashed in, around £650,000. Waterloo & Sons never really recovered from the lawsuit. They eventually got bought out by another company. As for Artur, he received a 20-year sentence. His trial dragged on for 5 years because his fake documents were so good the judges thought he had inside people at the central bank. He got out in 1945 and tried one last scam in Angola's coffee business, which was also a bust. Rees died of a heart attack in 1955. If you enjoyed learning about Arturo's crazy plan, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And let me know in the comments below what other historical cons you'd like to see next.